Have you ever met someone who thinks they're really, really good at something, but they're just not that good? You ever met someone like that? They think they're really good at something, but the truth is they're really bad at that thing. It reminds me of what I did with my family this week. We had some family time. I went and hung out with them. It was on Monday or Tuesday this week. I go upstairs, and I'm like, hey, family, what are you doing? And my family's watching on the Apple TV, like these American Idol and X Factor, like angriest moments where, and the reason that you should be watching those shows is not really for the competition, it's for the auditions, okay? Because the auditions, remember American Idol back a long time ago when you were like just being born and stuff, and before that? How the best part of the shows is the auditions because you get those people that come in there and are so bad at singing, and they're like, no, I'm great. You don't understand. No, I'm the best. I will be so great. I'll be so famous. You judges who are, really famous and important and good at judging, because that's why you're judges, right? You guys don't know anything, right? That's what those people, and they blow up and they get angry. I saw this one girl take someone's water and throw it at the judge. It was really crazy. It was intense. I don't know if it was worth watching, but it was pretty cool. But they thought they were really good at singing. The truth is they weren't. And the truth is about us, I bet that you think you're really good at something I'm about to talk about. At least I think I am, and I think that's the general consensus. Everyone thinks they are good at this one thing, but the truth is we might not be as good as at it as we think we are. The thing I want to ask you, are you good at this, is I want to ask you, are you good at love? Are you good at showing love to other people? And I think generally everyone would be like, well, yeah, of course. I'm really good at that. And maybe instead of being good at it, you're actually like one of those X Factor singers who's really terrible at it, and the judges have to tell you, actually, you're pretty bad. And to check out, hey, how good are you at showing love towards other people, we're going to look at an example of love here in 1 John. So if you got your Bible, turn it open to 1 John chapter 3, verse 16. 1 John 3:16. Not John 3:16, but 1 John 3:16. But it actually is very similar to John 3:16. The 3:16s all go together for some reason. It's kind of weird. Wasn't intentional, but 1 John 3:16. Last week, if you remember, we talked about Cain, we talked about Abel. We said you, as a Christian, cannot be a hater, okay? You can't be someone who hates other people, because if you're a hater, 1 John says, well, you're actually like a murderer. You got the same things going on in your heart, and you can't reconcile those two things together, being a hater and being born of God. You're probably not God's kid if your pattern of life is to hate and to show that hate in anger towards other people. You're probably not a part of God's family. And this whole book and this whole chapter especially is saying, hey, who's the real Christians? Who's the fake Christians? And today, the test of true Christianity is whether or not you show love. So check it out. 1 John 3:16 says this. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us. He's saying this is the definition of love. This is how we know what love is. 1 John 3:11 gave the command, this is the message that you've heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. So that's already been said. Hey, guys, you need to love each other. And you guys know that. But John's saying right here, this is how we know what love is. This is how we know how to do it. Like the specifics of it. This is how we know that he, that's Jesus, laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. There's something about what Jesus did in showing love towards us that we're called to replicate, that we're called to do as he did, especially when it comes to love. Verse 17 gives kind of a negative side of this. It says, but if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? That question of hey, how can that person really be a Christian? How can that person really be obeying God in that moment? That question's been asked a lot. But this time, John says, hey, if you have something that you can meet the need of someone else and you close your heart, you see that someone needs something, you see that someone could benefit from something, but you in your heart say, no, I don't really want to do that. He's saying, hey, how does God's love abide in you? God's love is actually doing stuff. It's actually actions. It's not just feeling. We talked about that before. Look at verse 18. It says, little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. That doesn't mean you can't love with your words. Really, today, I actually want to talk about some ways that we can show love with our words. But he's saying, don't be loving in a limited form. Don't just love with what you say. Don't just like say, oh yeah, I love you so much, and then don't do anything about it. Love is more than just feelings. It's more than just words. It's actually about what you do. And the person who's the best at loving is the person who does the most things and does the best things for other people. So we all need to admit, hey, maybe we're not as good at loving as we thought. If really that's the definition of love, it's us doing things for other people, us putting other people before ourselves, then that's kind of a check to tell us, wow, I might not be as good at loving people as I thought. We need to look to Jesus' example and follow it. Check out verse 16 again. It says, this is the definition of love. This is how we know what love is, that he laid down his life for us. If we're going to learn to love, we need to look to Jesus' example. That's point number one. See how Jesus loved people. See how Jesus loved people. It's so important to see what he did, and it's so awesome that we have 4 books of this Bible that tell us all about how Jesus lived his life. And the book that we're reading right now in DBR is a pretty cool one. The book of Mark, okay? It doesn't get a lot of love. I'll tell you that. Mark is kind of an unpopular kid, okay, when it comes to the Gospels. They don't give him much love because it's the shortest Gospel. I think it's like 98% of the stuff that's in Mark is in a different Gospel. So they usually turn to a different Gospel. But I want to spend some time in the book of Mark today. And maybe one of the most important verses in the book of Mark talking about Jesus is Mark 10:45. So if you grab your Bible, turn left to the book of Mark. It's the second book in the New Testament. You got Matthew, and then you got Mark. If you're in 1 John, turn left a few books. Mark chapter 10, verse 45. This is the summary statement of Jesus' life. What did Jesus do when he came to earth? How did he live? What did he do? It says this, the Son of Man, that's Jesus, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. So Jesus' outlook on life is this. As he is alive, it's to serve other people. And not only that, but to give his life as a ransom for many. A ransom, that means like if someone's a slave and you have the payment that you can give to free that slave, that payment is called a ransom. So he's saying, my life is actually a ransom to who? Not to Satan, not to sin necessarily, but to God himself. Jesus paid God with his life because we lived sinful lives. So Jesus, when it says he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers, that is not limited to like dying for people, okay? When we say this verse, a lot of people say, oh, okay, well, this is what love is. If I like died for somebody, that would be pretty epic, right? And look, I'd give you props and I'd go to your funeral and stuff. If you like died for your friend, that'd be pretty cool. Good job. That's a good, noble thing. But it's not what it's limited to. Jesus, yes, he did come to die, but before that, he came to live for us. If Jesus just came to die, he could have come down for a day and a half, but he came down for over 30 years and lived as a human being. He lived so that we could be saved. I want you to imagine, there's this guy who sits in the White House right now. Every person who's ever sat in the White House, the President of the United States. They're pretty important guys, right? We've talked about the President of the United States and how important he is. I want you to imagine that the President was coming to town, okay? If the President was coming to town, where do you think the President would stay? Okay? President's used to the White House, used to this big house, a bunch of staff. Do you think the President would sleep in your backyard? Okay? Or is that what we're thinking? He's going to roll in, Air Force One, get out of the motorcade, like the bulletproof car that, like if you nuked it, it would still survive and stuff, that thing. And he'll roll out, and he's coming to Orange County. Where do you think he's going to stay? Okay? If I was choosing where he could stay, I'd probably say maybe the Ritz-Carlton, okay, right on the ocean. It's pretty nice. Maybe the other one that's right there. What is that one? The Monarch Beach, right? St. Regis, right? That's probably where I'd put Donald Trump up, okay? That's where I'd put the president up if he was coming to town. Well, when Jesus came to town, so to speak, Not the president, but the God of the universe, the God who made everything. He didn't just come and, I'm going to live in Jerusalem, I'm going to live in the palace. That's not what he did. John 1:14 talks about how Jesus came. It says he came and the Word became flesh. He put on flesh, Jesus did, and dwelt among us. And that word dwelt is actually the word for tabernacle or tent. It's the idea of when Jesus came to earth, he didn't stay in a hotel. Jesus stayed in a tent in your backyard, like with your dog. Like that's the idea. That someone who's so important didn't stay where he could have stayed, didn't live where he could have lived, that was really important. He wasn't even esteemed as an important guy. People had a pretty low opinion of him. He was a peasant. He was a carpenter. Nobody really important, not that special. That's what the God of the universe did. See how Jesus loved people in that way. Philippians 2, verse 6 talks about what Jesus did. So going from being God in heaven, coming down, taking on human form, it says, though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. That means, like, if the president was going to come to town, he wasn't flashing his credentials saying, hey, I'm the president. I should stay at St. Regis. I should stay at the Ritz-Carlton. No, he's like, no, he endured what he was put under. He endured being a peasant, being nobody that was really that important. He did that. He emptied himself, verse 7 says, by taking on the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. When you think about Jesus' love for you, I want you to be blown away by it. When you think about how amazing it is that Jesus would live for you and die for you, you need to be amazed by that. That needs to be something that continually blows your mind. He lived, Matthew 3:15 says, to fulfill all righteousness. Jesus didn't just come for a weekend. He lived, and he lived a perfect life so that when he died on the cross, he could pay for your sins and that he could give you that perfect life of righteousness. If he didn't live for over 30 years of perfect life, if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have the righteousness to give you. So maybe you could be forgiven, that would be good, but you couldn't be adopted. You couldn't be justified in the sense of being given this perfect righteousness. You couldn't do that if Jesus just died for you. But Jesus lived and died for you. He laid down his life for you, not just while he died on a cross, but while he lived. But he did lay down his life on the cross, and perhaps that's the most amazing thing. I said we were in Mark 10:45. Turn to the right a few chapters to Mark 14, verse 32. Mark 14. The book of Mark is kind of interesting. Like I said, it's a small book. There's actually not many words from Jesus in this book. Matthew and Luke and John have all these big sermons and long prayers of Jesus. But Mark, Jesus kind of keeps it short and sweet. Mark 14:32, he sets the scene here in 32. He says, and they went to a place called Gethsemane. This is at the end of his life, the second to last day that Jesus was ever alive. It says, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. Verse 33 says, and he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. So Jesus is upset right now. Obviously, it makes sense. He's about to die on the cross. He's about to have his back torn out by whips and all these disgusting things. He's about to hang on a cross and suffocate to death, all while he's taking God's eternal wrath for your sin and my sin. So, yeah, he's a little bit distressed. He's greatly troubled. Verse 34, he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. So when we think about how Jesus loved us, let's just remember, let's just be reminded right now that Jesus loved us enough to go through this torment. Look at verse 35. And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. What that means is he's saying, I know I'm about to die, but he's praying to God, please, just, it'd be nice if I didn't have to do this. He's feeling it right now. This is where, the rubber meets the road for Jesus. This is hard stuff. Look at verse 36. This is what he prayed. It says, Abba, Father, right? We talked about that a couple weeks back. That's the personal name for God. He's calling God Dad right there. He says, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet, not what I will, but what you will. What he's saying is, yeah, I'd like to not die on the cross right now. This is going to be hard. This is going to be a sacrifice. It's going to be the worst sacrifice ever. but ultimately, I'm not going to do what I want. I will do what you want. I am full of so much love, and I love people so much that even though I don't want to sacrifice for them in this way, I will because it's what you will. When we see that kind of love, that's the kind of love that we need to get towards. That's why I said, well, are you good at love? Are you bad at love? And you probably thought, yeah, I'm pretty good at love. Well, when you look at this, hopefully you can see a distinction between the way that you love and the way that Jesus loved, and hopefully you're amazed by that love, and we need to push towards that love. And if you're a Christian here this morning, when you look at that love, you need to think this one thing especially. I was saved by that love. And because you're saved by that love should also motivate you. Jesus cared so much for you, for a person that was his enemy, that he came and lived and died for you. With that in mind, 1 John 3 goes on, verse 17 says, but if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, all right, so you've got something that can meet someone else's need. You have that, but you close your heart against that person. How does God's love abide in you? Little children, let us not love in word or talk only, but indeed in truth. Last week we talked about how, we can't be haters, okay? And hopefully this week you thought about some of the people that you were angry with in your heart. Hopefully you reconciled with a few people. Hopefully there were some people that you were upset at or they were upset at you and you asked for forgiveness. I pray that happened this week. And if it didn't, make that happen this week. But you can't just stay in that middle category of not being a hater, okay? Because we said, you said you can't not just be a hater, okay? You need to go from being a hater to being someone who loves people. And I'm afraid that we kind of hang out in that category right in the middle, that you might say, well, at least I don't hate people, right? I'm not a hater. I'm cool with everybody. But do you love people? Do you actually care about other people more than yourself? There's this big chasm between hate and love that you need to bridge. And you might have bridged that out of that hate category. You might be, okay, I don't hate these people anymore. I forgive them. We're cool. But have you moved all the way over to that category of love? Or are you indifferent? Or are you like, people, they're whatever. And you don't really care about people. We need to start caring about other people. That's point number 2. Start really caring about other people. Start really caring about them, seeing them and having that compassion. It says the person that we can't be like is being a person who sees a need and feels something in their heart. Right? So it's not saying that person doesn't feel anything. It says they feel it. They say, oh man, I should help that person. Oh man, that person's all by themselves. I should talk to that person. But it's like they feel it and then they close their heart. It's like when you want to be a man, you want to be macho, and you have like, you feel like you want to cry, guys over here, my left side, and you feel like you want to cry, but it's like, no, somebody's over there. It's like you get hit really hard with something, or you get like injured or whatever, and there's people there. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I feel like crying, but I'm not going to. You've all been there. Maybe you just cry. Maybe you don't even care. But if you're a prideful person, maybe you're like, oh, I don't want to cry. I don't want people to see me cry. If you're a girl, it's like, I don't want my mascara to run. It took me 3 hours to put it on this morning. I don't want it to run. It's not waterproof. And if you're a guy, you just naturally, you don't want people to see you cry, right? And you have that like suppression. Ooh, I'm going to suppress that feeling. Right? When it comes to compassion, when it comes to about caring other people, we're not called to suppress that. Actually, we're called to act on that. If you see a need and you don't act on it, how does God's love abide in you? You need to start really caring about people because that's what Jesus did, right? To live and to die for us especially, but also in Mark chapter 6. I told you we were going to be in Mark for a little bit. Look at Mark 6. Turn to the left a few chapters. Mark 6, verse 30. We see the compassion of Jesus. We see how he cares about people. And I want to show you the situation that this scenario happens. So the context of Mark 6 is, if you see the header above verse 7, Mark 6:7 says Jesus sends out the 12 apostles. So he sends these guys out, the disciples, the apostles, and they're preaching. They're doing miracles, and they're tired, and they're going into towns, and they don't even know who they're going to stay with. And they are sleeping in people's backyards and upper rooms and all that kind of stuff. And they're kind of like traveling missionaries. And Jesus is doing all this work too. And guess what? Jesus is exhausted. So check it out in verse 30. It says, the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, this is Jesus talking, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. So let's talk about what these disciples were doing. They were doing so much evangelism, so much work, so much service, that they didn't even get 3 meals a day. They were like, oh, I want to eat, but I got to talk to these people about the gospel. That's what they were doing. So Jesus is saying, hey, guys, let's take a rest. Good job. Let's take some rest. It's like after up all night, but worse, right? That's how they're feeling right now, right? You remember how you felt, okay? You felt tired. Some of you didn't even make it. Some of you guys were just sleeping on, like everywhere here in the morning. Like maybe that was you. I don't know. But that's kind of how Jesus and the apostles feel right now. But I would imagine much worse because we fed you so much. We gave you candy and Taco Bell and breakfast burritos and orange juice and other stuff probably, right? And it was awesome. But these guys didn't even get to eat. They are that tired and famished. And look at what Jesus does. Verse 32, they went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. They're just taking a break. Verse 33 says, now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So on the Sea of Galilee, it's a pretty big lake. It's bigger than Lake Mission Viejo, guys. Okay, it's bigger than that one. Not as big as the Pacific Ocean, somewhere kind of right in between. No, it's closer to Lake Mission Viejo size. But it's a pretty big lake, and what they would do is they'd go on the boat in a desolate place, means they'd go to like a place where there's not a city. Right? There's all these cities, port cities. They'd go to kind of a place in the middle where there's nobody hanging out, and they were going there, and they were just going to hang out and rest and take a break. And it says the people saw them getting in the boats, were like, oh, these are the miracle workers. These are the guys who are preaching. We're going to go out to them. So as they went out from a port city, these people went from towns and like, we're checking out like, where are they going to land? Where are they going to land? We got this big crowd like trying to like see where Jesus is going to land, and they get to shore, and it's like, oh, we went here to find no people, and look, here we are. There's hundreds of people here. Well, actually, we find out later that there was thousands of people that came out to see Jesus. If you're Jesus and the apostles, if you're one of the disciples, what are you feeling at this moment? You just stayed up all night. You didn't even get to eat. You get on the boat. You get to the other side of the lake. Hey, guess what's hanging out right there? All these people. How do you feel at this point? Probably kind of upset, right? Well, verse 34, this is what Jesus said. It says, when he went ashore and saw the great crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He began to teach them many things. So Jesus, after up all night, you got that exhaustion feeling. He says, well, he had compassion on them. He felt for them, and he didn't suppress that. He didn't say, hey, guys, I've been hanging out with you too long. Go home. Go away. No. And later on, this is, if you see the header above verse 30, you'll know this is where Jesus feeds 5,000 people. Okay, McJesus blows up right here, gets 5,000 sales on the first day. That was a joke. They're out in the wilderness, and they got nothing to eat. And guess what Jesus does? Jesus feeds them miraculously. He cared so much about them. He saw their need, and he had compassion. He felt for them. I've talked about this before, I think in our #social series, but it's the word that means your guts, right? It's like you feel it. It's not, we say, oh, I feel you in your heart, right? Oh, I heart you. No, like back in the day, they'd say like, oh, I got you. Like, but not like I got you, like that's bad, like with a knife. But like, oh, I feel for you, man. Right, you know what I'm talking about when you get those feelings in your stomach. I think they had it better. I've never felt like it in my heart for people. I feel it in my gut for people when I see them, and it's like, oh, you watch one of those Facebook videos that's like super sad with a dog or whatever, and what does your stomach do? It's like, oh, I feel it. Right? I see people who are in need, and I feel it. That's what this says Jesus did. When it comes to our lives, I want you to ask yourself, do you feel that way for people? When people are in need, do you feel it in your stomach? This is just implying that we will feel it, and it's telling us when you feel it. You need to act on it. Well, I don't think some of us even feel it. I don't think some of us even have this compassion for people. I know that if you think, oh, I'm not a very sensitive person, I'm not one of those sensitive people. I'm a stronger guy. I'm a stronger girl. I don't really feel bad for all that stuff. Well, Jesus felt bad. Jesus was a pretty strong guy. He's a pretty tough guy. But he felt for people, and he acted on it. When's the last time that you gave up your comfort or your stuff because you felt compassion, you saw that someone else needed it instead of you? That's where we need to get. And I mean, you might be asking, well, I don't know. I think I care about people, but how can I know that I care about people? I got a couple questions for you. Question number 1, do you ignore people when they're struggling? Do you ignore people? Like you see them and you know they're hurting, you know they need something, but you're like, somebody else will take care of it. Oh, I know that person's sitting all by themselves. Someone else will take care of it. Someone else will talk to them. Someone else will, I don't need to be the person. Question number 2, do you avoid helping people when they need stuff? Do you avoid helping people? There's literally people who need something from you. You have the means to do something good for them, right? 1 John 3:17 is talking about your stuff, your money, right? And maybe you don't know that many people in your life that need your money or need your stuff, but hopefully if they did, you would give it to them. And we'll talk about that later. Question number 3, do you care enough about your friends to die for them? Because I know this text isn't just talking about dying for people, but it doesn't exclude that. That is definitely included in this. It's definitely a part of this. Do you care enough about your friends that you're willing to set aside your needs and your wants for them? I think this kind of brings us to a question. Do we have the right view of our stuff? Okay? Do we have the right view of our stuff? Do we have the right view of money? Do we think biblically about this stuff? Because 2 Corinthians 9:11 says, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous in every way. This group of people in Corinth, they were pretty rich people. And what Paul says to them is, hey, the reason that God gave you all this stuff is so that you can be generous. And I think you probably, if you're sitting here in this room, you probably fall into the category of having stuff, okay? You probably have more stuff than you need. The reason that you've been given that stuff by God, it's so clear right here, 2 Corinthians 9:11, so that you would be generous with other people. When's the last time you were generous with the stuff that you had? That's what showing love like Jesus looks like. That's what it really does. You might say that you're willing to die for a friend, and that's good, and I hope that's true of you. But are you willing to sacrifice for them now? I want you to imagine you're going camping, which would be kind of a scary thought if you went camping. I don't like camping, so that's why I say it's a scary thought. I'm not a hater on you campers. I love you guys, but if you like camping, that's your thing. It's not me, not for me. I want you to imagine you're out at, Joshua Tree or somewhere where there's those like big rocks, people go climbing on stuff. It's pretty cool. So I want you to imagine you're on one of those rocks and you run across this stranger and it's like, oh, what's up? It's like, oh, hey. And they're walking and you're walking, you don't really know them, and they trip. And they trip and they're hanging on. And they're barely hanging on. And what you were doing, because you're a cool socialite, right? So you were taking a Snapchat of you walking and stuff, right? Now you got your phone in your hand because you're taking Snapchats, and you see this person falling, and you're hanging on to the side of the wall, and you're making sure you're not falling, and you see them falling, and you have a choice. You have, I gotta get rid of this phone somehow. I gotta know where to put it. I gotta get rid of this phone so I can save this person, or I'm gonna hang on to my phone. Which one are you going to choose? What are you going to save? You save your phone, or are you going to save this person? Yeah, right. You might be a person that's so unloving that you would say you want to save your phone, right? Or, like, no, I need to save this person. If you're a person that really cares about people, you're going to save the people. You're going to save that, even if it costs you something. And if you don't do that, you do not love like Jesus. You don't love like him if you're not willing to save people over your stuff. And right, you might say, well, okay, that's kind of like an extreme example. I have pockets, That illustration doesn't even work. It's like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't. But you might be willing to drop your phone to help that person. But it's not just about you giving your life and you trying to save their life. It's also about how you live while they are alive. How you live and how you interact with people and how you show them love while you are alive. I said you might be willing to die for your friend, but are you willing to live and sacrifice for your friend? Because the two things are way different. It's kind of easier to say, yeah, I'll die, I'll give up my life, or even as hard as that is, sometimes it's harder for us to continually live and sacrifice for people, and that's really what love is. Point number 3, look for opportunities to sacrifice for people. Look for opportunities to sacrifice for people. That last verse says, little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. And there is deeds and there's things that you could do to help people. Love deeds that you could do. Things that you could do that would show love for people that you could do, but you need to look for those opportunities. One of the verses that everybody thinks about when they think of 1 John 3:16 is John 15, verse 12. I'll just read it for you. Jesus was talking to the disciples, and he says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. I mean, I think the first question is, hey, are you willing to lay down your life for your friends? If you're going to call yourself a Christian, that's the kind of love that you have. And if you look at your life and say, wow, I could never do that. And not only could I never do that in death, but I don't really want to sacrifice for people. I've never really shown any patterns of sacrifice for people. This is saying, if you're Jesus' disciple, if you're someone who he can call a brother, if you're someone who God can call his son or his daughter, then you need to love in that way. It's hard to do. But I want to talk about how we do that, okay? And to do that, there's a famous couple of verses in 1 Corinthians 13 that would be really helpful for you to look at. So if you haven't turned anywhere, turn here. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4. Paul gave a list, and he said, hey, this is what love looks like. Let's just put it into some practical terms. Just a few words, just a few things that love does, love is. 1 Corinthians 13, look at verse 4. He's been talking about how important love is and how actually love is better than anything you could do for anyone else. It's better than, giving even your body up. Love is the greatest. Love is more important. Look at verse 4. It says, love is patient. I think that's enough for us to handle right there, but we'll do some more. But think about this. Love is patient. Okay, that means that you have a long fuse. Okay, if you love like Jesus loves, and you look for opportunities to sacrifice for people, when you're talking with people, are you a patient person? Are you known as someone who, if they get reviled or slandered or someone says something bad about you, that you're, I'm patient. I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to hate. I'm not going to react with words that I shouldn't. I'm patient. That's what love is. Next one, love is kind. And kind does not just mean nice, okay? You might say, I'm nice. All my friends say I'm nice. Well, that's great, but are you kind? Kind means you actually do things for people. Nice is you react in a nice way to people, and you're pleasant, but even more than that, being kind is you doing things for other people. That's what love is. Love does not envy. It doesn't see stuff that other people want or other people have, and you just want it. Right? Whether that's you on your social media, whether that's you at school, you see something that someone else has, and you feel this, I want that. I envy. That's not what love does. Love is not envious. It doesn't boast, right? That's kind of the flip side of envy, right? Wanting what someone else has. If you're a boastful person, you have something that other people want, and you show it off, right? And when we're talking about social media, I think that's the place where most of you guys are the most tempted to boast. Right, I think in conversation, when all you want to talk about is you, that's not a very loving thing, but also on social media. If you use your social media to show the world, hey, this is what I have. This is all the great stuff that happens to me. These are all the people that love me. If that's like how you're using that, you might not be envious. Chances are you probably will be, but that's boastful. That's not what love does. If you love like God does, that's not going to be your pattern. Love does not boast. It's not arrogant, right? It doesn't want to show off. It doesn't want to tell people how great they are, doesn't even if in conversations want to just talk about themselves. Next one, it's not rude. That's kind of the reaction, right? To react in a rude way. Most of you probably don't plan on saying a rude comment. Most of you just are so smart and witty and sinful. You just, boom, shoot the rude comment right back at your mom, right back at your dad, right back at your friend. Right? Love doesn't do that, right? Think back to patient. Love is patient. Love does not insist on its own way. That might be the hardest one in this entire list for us. It doesn't insist on its own way. It doesn't get angry when my plans aren't met. It doesn't get upset when plans change and when things happen that I don't want to happen. That's what love does. Love does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable, right? It doesn't get angry quickly. It has a long fuse. It's slow to become angry. It's not resentful, right? Some translations say it doesn't keep a record of wrongs. That's what resentful means. When people do stuff against you, you're not keeping score like, okay, well, let me think. That person said this about me. That person said this about me. So I can use that if they ever say something bad about me. So I'll bring that up and make sure to include that in the conversation. So they owe me big time, right? I'm going to get revenge on them or whatever. That's being resentful, keeping a record of wrongs. Love does not do that. That's just 9 commands in 2 verses. But all of them say this: I'm going to put someone else first, and I'm going to be second. Someone else first, and I'm going to be second. When it comes to being patient, when it comes to being kind, not being envious, not being boastful or arrogant, not being rude, not insisting on your own way, not being irritable or resentful, all of those things say, I'm going to put someone else first, and I'm going to be second. That's hard for us to do, but before we leave, I want to get some faces in your minds about who you can show this love to. Who are you going to show this love of Christ to? Who's it going to be? Well, I think the first group of people is mom and dad, okay? We're talking about who are you going to love. There's 4 groups of people I have for you. The first one is your parents. How can you love your parents? I just want to shoot some practicals, so get those pens ready, and let's just be thinking through some of these. First of all, how can you show love to your parents? Well, by obeying their rules, by doing what they say. Even when you don't want to, even when you don't agree with the rule, you still keep the rule because guess what? Mom and dad said so I'm going to do it, even if I don't want to. Even if my friends don't have to keep that rule, I will obey them. How about obeying them the first time they ask you to? Not just saying, oh, well, I'll obey you, mom and dad. I'll take out the trash, but I'm going to wait until like Friday to take out the trash. I know it's Sunday. I know you're telling me to take out the trash, but I'll take it out, but like maybe next week. Or I'll wait. Or I'll do it the second, third, fourth, fifth time you ask. Showing this kind of love, showing it in deed and in truth, is not just saying you're going to obey. It's actually doing that obedience. Also, you can love your parents by making time for them, right? By actually spending time with your mom and dad, because guess what? They usually are going to want to spend time with you. And the older you get, the more you're going to realize that. They wish they could spend more time with you. They wish that you'd put down your phone and you put down your video games and you'd eat dinner with them and you spend time with them and you talk with them. That's what they want. That's a way that you can sacrifice for them because you probably want to be doing other things, and I get that. That's how you can sacrifice for them. You could love your parents by responding graciously when they're upset at you. Right? When they are not happy, when they're not having a good day, and maybe they snap and they say something bad towards you, you know how you could show love to them? First of all, you could forgive them. Don't be resentful. Don't keep a record of wrong, and don't snap back by being okay with that, just being calm about that. One more thing for your parents is being thankful. Telling them, hey, thank you so much for this and this and this. You have so many things to be thankful for to your parents. Love your parents. That's a group of people that you should be loving. Also, love your siblings. Let's talk about your siblings real quick. Your siblings. You can love them and love by action by helping them with their chores. Not just the stuff that you have to do, right? There's things that your parents want you to do, but there's also things that your parents want your siblings to do. What if you made your siblings' bed? What would happen? The world would probably stop spinning, right? That's probably what happened. Your parents would be like, what are they teaching you at that church? Like, what is happening, right? If you loved your siblings, what if you made their bed for them, right? That's a way that you could show love in deed. How about this? Not fighting over the bathroom, okay? We're just getting real here this morning, okay? Your siblings in the bathroom, you want to be in the bathroom, you got to do your makeup, right? The mirror is in the bathroom, my stuff is all in there. How can you show love? By being patient, letting them go first. That's how you could show this love of God. How about this? This is going to hit really close to home. You let your siblings borrow your stuff. Yeah, right? Because they're going to take it, whether you want to or not, okay? Girls, they're going to take your clothes, okay? Girls, if you have sisters, they will take your clothing, okay? That will happen, okay? They will take your makeup. They will use your deodorant. You know, my roommate was using my toothpaste for like 3 months. That was gross. I drew the line. I said, you know what? I'll buy you toothpaste. Just don't use my toothpaste. That's kind of gross. I'll buy you toothpaste, all right? Let them use your stuff. Even, okay, this would be crazy. The world would stop spinning if this happened. If you offered your stuff, you saw them in need, you saw that, they need something, they need deodorant, they need something, right? Maybe they need deodorant a lot. Hey, maybe they need toothpaste. Hey, let me buy you some toothpaste. They got something that they're going out and they need a dress. They need something. They need your shoes, right? They got the same shoe size as you. They need your stuff. How can you show love to your siblings? By being gracious and even offering it. Say, hey, do you want to use my stuff? Oh, hey, you're going out, you're going to play Ultimate Frisbee? You want to use my cleats? You want to use my ball? You want to use my bike? Whatever. That's some ways that you could love your siblings. What about your friends? That's the third group of people that you need to show love to. Your friends. When they have needs. When they have things that they need. Maybe when it's up all night and they need your jacket. You have 2 jackets. And they only have one, and they're freezing out there because I made you stay outside. That was good. That was thoughtful. I made you stay awake. I kept you awake. You're welcome. And you saw a sunrise? Guys, come on. Maybe when they're struggling with homework, people in your classes that you know aren't doing well, and they have a hard time getting the concepts. Maybe you get the concepts, and you could spend time at lunch instead of hanging out with your friends and doing whatever you want to do to help explain things to them. Help work through the math problems, help them with the essay or whatever, help them understand something, help them with schoolwork. That's one way that you could show love towards them. Another group of people that you need to love, they actually might be in either of these categories, your parents, your siblings, or your friends. The fourth group of people is you need to love lost people. You need to love lost people, people that are not Christians. Maybe your parents aren't Christians. Maybe your siblings aren't Christians. Maybe your friends aren't Christians. You need to love them and sacrifice to them. Last week we said expect to be hated by them. Don't expect to be like Cain. Don't be like Cain. Expect to be like Abel. Expect to be hated because you're doing the right thing. You can love them by graciously accepting whatever they do to you, accepting whatever words they say to you, being okay with it, saying, I forgive you, it's okay, let's move on, because you think about what Jesus did for you. Think about how Jesus loved you. Romans 5, 7, and 8, I quote this all the time, but it says, for one would scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would even dare to die. But God showed his love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That's what Jesus did for you when you were a lost person. He came, he lived, he died, and he rose again so that you could be saved. That needs to motivate you. There's people at school, there's people on your sports teams, there's even probably people here at the Narrow in your small group that are lost people, that are not Christians. You can love them in a special way by telling them the truth about that. Last night we were up all night, and we did that pretty cool scavenger hunt, which I thought was pretty awesome. Some of you guys cheated and did videos and boomerangs and stuff, but it's okay. I didn't say it had to be a photo scavenger hunt. It's all cool. But we went to downtown Disney, and something that I think about every time I go to Disneyland, which is like once every 2 or 3 years, except for up all night. I go with you guys. But there's those hidden Mickeys. You guys ever seen those hidden Mickeys? Right? Here's the thing about hidden Mickeys. They're not that hidden. They're like really easy to find, okay? It's like, ooh, did you find that hidden Mickey on Pirates of the Caribbean? It's like, yeah, well, everyone has seen that. Duh. Like, are you crazy? Of course I've seen that hidden Mickey, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. Hidden Mickeys. They're everywhere. I found a hidden Mickey the the other day. I was looking up Disney World, and one of their like parking lots is shaped like Mickey Mouse. I'm like, you guys, come on, Disney, what's with you guys hiding these Mickeys everywhere, right? The hidden Mickeys are not that well hidden, just want to say that. But they're easy to find when you look for them. The same thing's true with opportunities to sacrifice for people. You might think, oh, they're hidden, I don't know where they are. But once you start looking for them, you're going to find ways. Whether that's with your siblings, whether that's with your friends, with your parents, with your neighbors, with lost people, you need to show love to them. The love that Jesus showed, which is hard. Maybe you think you're good at love. Hopefully, you've seen today. And maybe you're not as good at love as you think. You need to look at Jesus' example of love and try to show that love. Let's pray, everybody.